Okay. Now that that is started, let me go ahead and introduce you to today's speaker, Dr. Thomas A. Werger, who is a NITLE Fellow and an independent consultant, and I've had the pleasure of doing a little bit of consulting along with Tom. He is going to be speaking to us today about the new information technology organization for liberal arts colleges, how things have really changed over the last 10 or more years, and we need to rethink how we should be organized. And I have to say he has an immense amount of expertise to address this area, having in the past been both the CIO for Bryn Mawr College, but also he has been interim CIO at 5 different institutions, and at least 2 of those places that included being the library director as well. So he'll be speaking to information technology and including library organization as well today. So it's with my pleasure that I'm introducing Dr. Tom Werger. And Tom, please go ahead and take it away. I'm going to give you presentation control now.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you could join us today, and we're very pleased with the nice turnout for this series. I'll just add that as a note, I'm not going to, probably won't be able to follow the chat line, the chat scroll very well as speaker. I have enough trouble, chewing gum and walking at the same time. So Rebecca will be watching that, and when we get to the questions portion of the hour, she will call out some of those questions, and that's how we'll handle that. Okay, looks like I've got your screen and not mine here, Rebecca.
You just need to click over to the tab for your slides. I'm sorry. You want to get all the way to the right.
That's looking familiar. Oh yeah, here we go. That's me.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Last May, there was a real blast, an explosion, sort of, on the heels of all the publicity that the Khan Academy had gotten, and with the publicity coming out when other big universities started jumping on board with MOOCs. And there was an op-ed article in the New York Times by David Brooks, and I put up a little quote here from it. And what I've seen, and what I think we've all seen and heard, is that this really got the attention of lots of people, including trustees and in many cases college presidents, who didn't necessarily follow IT very closely or had a very limited and outdated view of what it is. I should also add, many of us also have had and have been working and work today with a rather outdated view. So that's really the premise, the starting point for today's discussion. You'll see I've also noted on the slide here that Brooks, in his article, cites Ken Auletta, and it's a very good article that he wrote that's available online free in the New Yorker. And Brooks freely acknowledges that that's pretty much what he was speaking to. So I would really recommend that you know what's in those articles and be ready to speak to those if those are new to you. To distill a lot of discussion down, as to what is this problem and what are our possible responses to it, that could easily take all afternoon, and I just really don't intend to go there. But I will start with this slide, which I have condensed from an article by Gregory Jackson in the EDUCAUSE review online. And he, like Clay Christensen, who spoke at EDUCAUSE out in Denver and who's written every few months on the topic of disruption in higher ed in particular. It's been one of his interests in particular. If you don't know him, he's a well-known management consultant, and disruptive innovation is pretty much a term that he invented, I believe. He's certainly the foremost user of it. So distilling down a lot of really very interesting and sophisticated thought into just a simple graphic, are these our choices? Do we just evolve IT, doing more of the same, doing it better, doing it more efficiently, streamlining things, extending the reach, developing ourselves professionally, all the things that we've always thought? Is that that might be characterized as one path, one direction. And frankly, that is what we've been trained for. That's what we coach each other to do. That's what EDUCAUSE supports us to do. It's the kind of thing that NITLE concentrates on. This is where your best practices are enshrined in this path towards evolution. The other path being proposed here, and that I'm focusing on for this presentation, is that of transformation, radical transformation, redefinition of what is IT, what is education, what roles do our institutions play, have they played in the past, will they play in the future, where are the challenges, what might be replaced in all these pictures. Will colleges and universities be replaced? I don't think so, but the question's certainly around out there. Will we be replaced as individuals in IT and library and other related lines of work? Oh, I really doubt that, except through budget attrition, which doesn't single us out necessarily. But we may, as we'll see later in this talk, we may want to look at how we propose to replace ourselves in some ways, put ourselves in new places and in new roles. So this is sort of my starting point for a couple of themes or counterpoints that go back and forth through the rest of the presentation. I'd like to throw out a background question for you, and you're welcome to start banging away at this in the chat space and certainly discuss it. I'd be very happy to discuss it after I've run through the prepared portion of my remarks. The question is, if your group were truly organized to make change happen, how different would it look? I won't belabor the question. I'll just leave it there for a moment for you to mull over and to begin working on. And this pretty much guides also what I'm looking at myself as we go through today's conversation. Here's a breakdown from an article. I'll have to add the citation on here, seem to have left it off. I think it's from Higher Ed CIO from this fall. And it gives a kind of benchmark. It proposes as a benchmark that this is the typical staff breakdown by percentage in institutions of higher education. And as I recall from the article, not grossly different in many of the commercial settings. So let's take a look at this for a minute. And I'll run around the screen looking at or filling in for you some of the definitions on these terms. Management is not just who is a manager, but what percentage of time across perhaps, well, certainly a number of people gets devoted to the task of management. So in this article, and certainly in my thinking about it, there's a movement to go from the count on the org chart to trying to take a look at just what actually do people do. So for starter purposes, discussion purposes, let's go with the 12% that's represented here. Applications, 35%. Well, this takes in all of the administrative computing operations. It takes in most likely, I think it's safe to count the LMS in here. Web gets counted in here. I don't really have any more insight on what that term means than anybody else in the audience, but I think I can represent fairly that that's the way the article in Higher Ed CIO talks about this term or understands it. Infrastructure weighing in at 25%. Let's consider that network and servers. I don't know really whether classroom maintenance counts in this portion or not. That wasn't clear, but pending for the infrastructure. User services, 18%, and non-categorized, uncategorized remainders, fractions, adding up to about 10%. I tested this with a consulting client of mine just a couple of weeks ago, and they came out within a percentage point of two for each of these. I'd be interested to know whether these are grossly different from what you see on your campus in the central IT outfit. And as I think back over colleges and universities that I've worked with over the last whatever number of years, my intuition is that this looks pretty good. So I like it. I've been working from it. We can argue over details or such, but there it is. I'd like to switch now to a different perspective that I'll come back to and tie many of the remarks that I'm making this afternoon, tie them back to this. I fell into the habit a few years ago of talking about the IT 100. There should be quotes around that probably. The IT 100 people. And looking over the participants list for this seminar, I see that I'm guessing in many cases, some cases I know, but in many cases I'm guessing that your IT staff is anywhere between 15 and 50 people, not too many at 50, but somewhere in that range. Not 100 people, not 200, not a big university size. All right, so that's some small number. Let's go with 20. Well then, in the library, let's look at the library then. Again, whether the organizations are merged or separate or just how this falls out on the org chart, I'll bet it doesn't take you too long to get up to a half dozen people in the library, from technical services, people who reference services, people who work in library instruction, people who manage systems at the library. But these people, like all the rest of the 100 I'm talking about, have a significant IT component to what they do. It may not even show up in their resume, and they may not be viewed that way. They may not view themselves as being IT vital people, but I think you can follow my line of thinking and saying, yes, okay, that's a pretty easy place to discover that there are people with knowledge and resources that fit into the bigger IT picture, not just the work of the central IT group, but the institution's need to work with IT. Most campuses have a center for teaching. Again, those are usually small, 1, 2, 3 people. Even on university campus, those tend to be 3, 4, 5 people. And technology is not what they do, but they touch it all the time. What they do touch, and what we should be interested in, and why they get a place of pride in this list, is that they are, or certainly should be, interested in issues of innovation, of solving problems with faculty, and that if you've worked with people from your Center for Teaching, that there's often an IT component to answers, sometimes to the problems. Just to run down a few of the rest, just quickly to give a sense and a flavor of this. Lab managers, thinking about people in the natural sciences who assist in those laboratories, maintain equipment, often run computer labs, often run servers. And you may also have lab managers in language lab, digitization lab, other specialized computing facilities that have a base that's outside central IT and, for the purposes of this list, outside the library. Almost every campus now has some office devoted to what is, I've seen recently called student success, which is support services for students, academic and social. The finance department, payroll clerk, comptroller, purchasing people, people who work on inventory. Also, every campus now pretty much has a risk management officer, and they're often reporting to the CFO. Public safety, as users of IT, as users of systems and people who are dependent on systems that are vitally important 24/7. May even have equipment in their patrol cars, have to look up information about individuals or building layouts online all the time. And because they're out and about around campus, are in touch with many people. There are precious few organizations on even a small campus that have the scope of contact that they do, so that's always useful. And of course, public safety offices have become very interested in identity theft in recent years. Physical plant should be obvious, supplying electricity, low voltage systems that they manage, both from the standpoint of what they mean to IT operations, but also the fact that they're running a very big IT operation in parallel to the campus data network and probably even the phone network. Again, if you have separate phone office, phone service, they'd be on this list. Oh, let's not overlook faculty. What percentage of the faculty are, movers and shapers in IT, have unique expertise, have in some cases their own facilities, and almost inevitably are the experts on either some facet of usage of IT or software. Student IT staff, people who work for IT departments, typically underused. I'd say 9 out of 10 campuses that I visit where you see the student workers sitting, in the help center, help desk, technical support room. Most of the time they're reading homework. And so I just put in a footnote saying also a vastly underused group by and large. Some schools do a much better job, I would say, of optimizing what these workers can contribute. Students at large, call them not unkindly, call them the crowd, as in crowdsourcing. Somebody who knows Android inside and out, Android systems, operating, the Jelly Bean, things that you will never get a full-time staff person to cover, but are increasingly important. Don't want to overlook the HR department. Obviously, when it comes to things like when administrative offices hire staff, are they putting the right requirements, are those offices putting the right requirements in job descriptions, and do they interview competently to get the right skills? I'm going to cut off here because when I was making the list here, that's where I cut off. But this could go on. I will bet if we run back over just these bullets here, that we're probably looking at 100 already on most campuses. My point is not that we deputize these people to go out and install new computers, take viruses off, not to do that kind of work, but to participate in the bigger sense, the bigger virtual organization of people who are engaged in IT, sometimes in very disjointed ways, and who work with, who cross boundaries so that they're working with folks in different areas, but not necessarily in any well understood or even I'll call it deliberate manner. In other words, intended to work that way. So when I think about organizational issues in IT and in liberal arts institutions and in smaller institutions even more so, I tend personally not to be as impressed by the org chart as I am at what is the reality on the ground hour to hour in a bigger, more complex picture, a more complex chart that would show the interconnections among these folks. So an interesting challenge, certainly one I'm going to work on myself with current consulting clients, and you might want to do this on your campus, is what would a chart look like, a graphic that had bubbles proportional to the size of the by number of people that you would put in each of these listings, contacts that they have with each other, maybe weight it for frequency of contacts, That would be very interesting if everybody had those and if we were looking at those, see how common they are. And it's also a lot of fun to discover the surprises of, people that you didn't necessarily count in here. I remember, for example, an assistant treasurer at one school I worked at who designed a new letterhead and for the institution just in her spare time, if that was indeed spare, in Excel of all things. And we took that up, used it as a template college-wide, and printed all of our letterhead from then on that way. So she would have a place of honor in the list of 100, for sure. So this is my second and last toss-out question for you. What do you think of this IT 100 idea? Is it a valid concept? Is it valid as a goal, or does it is it more important as a goal, or does it actually come close to the reality? Not that there be 100, but that the value of the interrelationships, the value of the contact and mutual support and mutual awareness raising, does that happen? Is that real? And then the wrap-up question on this is, can we think of ways to make it real and effective? And sort of what would that mean? Where would that lead as we go down the road? That's kind of a casual metaphor level. What we're talking about here is, it takes a village to do IT in the 21st century. Or, as I was thinking a week or so ago, this goes back to the stone soup story. So maybe the people who have IT in their job descriptions have got the pot and the fire and some water and maybe a hot stone. Everybody else brings the ingredients that actually make something of this. So I'm grasping around trying to find ways to explain this to people who don't find this kind of thing fascinating as we all do. I'm going to turn now to several articles that I had cited, posted, that Rebecca has put up in the introductory materials for today's lesson. This diagram you're looking at now was pulled from an article by Randall Bass in EDUCAUSE Review, I believe it was. Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, the link is down there, and so he's picking up on the Christensen and others theme of, rather than sitting and watching ourselves be disrupted, be picked to pieces, be marginalized, people go around us, people don't really know why. What does our IT group do? In other words, all kinds of things that are viewed as disruptive and as threats in a way. So he concentrates in his article on the 4 topics that are arrayed around the outside of what he has here as the formal curriculum. So the way Bass is approaching this issue is that he's saying, look, the core of what we do and how things have been, how we're organized, all gets tied back to the formal curriculum, semesters, courses, 4-year sequence towards a bachelor's degree, teaching styles and methods, forums, etc. So that's sort of the baseline. And then arrayed around it are some of the disruptors. I won't talk about all of them, or at least not all of them in any depth at all, but the opposite, the way direct challenge to formal curriculum is the so-called informal learning. And by the way, again, for purposes of argument, I would throw the massive online courses into this category. You have a situation where only 5% of the people are completing these courses. They're not really viewing them the way normal courses are being viewed, but that's the point, and it doesn't diminish their value. Informal learning also means the obvious range of things, what people see and do and talk about outside of class. The collaborative work, both assigned and spontaneous, that happens. just interactions with faculty in their office hours. And I think, I believe that there is a case to say, and the case that Bass is making, is that we're paying a lot of attention now and looking for ways to facilitate what happens in this realm of informal learning. In a wider sense, now stepping out beyond higher education and education in any frame, we're obviously in a participatory culture. Social media is the obvious tag and most prevalent sign of that. But it goes back, I think, to some more subtle things, too. If we think about, the decline of traditional sources of intellectual and moral authority, and, please hear me right, I'm not bemoaning that decline at all. But I'm saying that we all people alive today have a much stronger sense, I think, well, let's talk about sweeping generalizations. Certainly the folks we come across in our work expect to be able to contribute, expect to be heard, expect to give feedback, and to participate in assessments. And this trend is also one that technology in a number of ways facilitates and drives, just as it does for informal learning. I'm going to just mention the other two in passing. Experiential co-curriculum. The point I would make here is that let's be a little bit careful about this. It seems every campus has got an office, for experiential learning or such, and it's often a place that organizes voluntary internships or a few targeted programs that the institution does. But keep in mind, too, that there are institutions out there who have really folded experiential learning into an extended curriculum. I'm thinking, just to give one example, nothing special except this one I happen to know a little bit about. Think about Drexel University in Philadelphia, where it's a very well-organized, well-established, deeply rooted, highly successful program where students, go out and work in the professions that they anticipate going into, and that's really core to how that institution conducts education. So there's a whole range from everybody who's just sort of gathering together a few internships, hanging a shingle on the door and saying, we do experiential co-curriculum or such. But think about what are the IT implications of these programs, the mobility of the people who participate, the different environments they go into, and let's be talking too again in our discussion today about what are the organizational implications of a heavy-duty program of this kind. Skip high-impact practices for right now. I do encourage you to go back and read the article. Here's a second one, Gregory A. Jackson, and I call the list from his subheaders in the article, and he's going into a little more detail on what he sees, and many people are talking about as the kind of drivers of transformation and disruption. And I think the questions as we look at these are, to what extent are they recognized and understood on our campuses? Are they viewed as threats or as distinctive characteristics? How do they intersect with the current understanding of mission on campus, and also on the purposes of the institution's work in IT? I'm going to look just at a couple of these in a sample way, just to show you how, when I'm looking at them, I tease out some of the organizational issues. We start with guidance and pedagogy, and Jackson makes the interesting point that a lot of our colleagues on campus, students, and I would add faculty too, are really going quite a ways in trying to fend for themselves. the people who really know this the best are reference librarians. You often hear that that their clientele, which is our clientele, everybody's clientele in higher ed, that students overestimate their own ability to find good sources. I don't need to go into much detail on that. But if we think about what things should people be asking all of us, and I'm talking now back about the IT 100, what questions are we not being asked that we should be asked? And also from an organizational standpoint, are we organized properly to do justice to the kinds of challenges that come out of this notion here about the freewheeling situation there in guidance and pedagogy? I'll throw in a couple of illustrations here. I hear often, that faculty feel they have nowhere to go, nobody to go to ask advice on, how to do more with anything you might want to name, Google Docs, whatever the topic. And I hear IT staff saying, listen, we're so busy just trying to answer the basic questions that we have to turn them away. And so, I go back and wonder, okay, where is the greater value? And of course, ignoring people whose computers don't work is not going to work either. But if you think back to the pie chart that I showed a few slides ago, and I'll flip back to that in a few minutes so we can return and see what are the implications there. So are we, in the big IT picture, putting a big enough proportion of our resources into the help and guidance aspect of things? Also take a look at, let's say, the analytics, privacy and analytics. The analytics issue is one that EDUCAUSE has specifically foregrounded in the last couple of years, and it is a piece of transformation that's happening out across higher ed. And you can sort of boil it down to, we've got lots of data about our students, most of it generated by transactions that range from admissions to, grade reports and transcripts, but on many other points too. And, what are we doing with these? How are we getting ourselves smarter, better informed for having these? Do we even look at them? Does anybody have the time and the skills to do this? And what would be the skills implication at IT for looking at something like this? Many IT shops have on-staff support for custom and ad hoc query. Not everybody, but many do. And for operational reports, but not so much for analytics. Part of it's a question of time. There's also skills. But what are the organizational implications of an institution becoming a lot more serious about looking at data and making decisions based on it? So before moving on, I'll just note that on this slide, I've just put one tag sentence phrase under each of these rubrics just to give you a sense of where the article is going with them. If you take the time to go back and read this article, I would say take it a step farther than Jackson has by asking the question, what do we need to learn from these topics, from these factors that will shape how we go about our business. And then this one is from an article that I wrote last fall for EDUCAUSE Review. And here too, I've pulled the rubrics and just put a tagline under each of them. And as in the previous slide, I'll just look at a couple or three briefly. The topics of change, this time for real, and new alignments of priorities are actually pretty closely related. And they have to do with asking ourselves, what is going to be the continuing, the durable, the persistent effect of the economic hard times that we've been through the most recent recession. Couple that together with the really stronger than ever political pressure, starting with Barack Obama, the president, but working through state legislatures, local school boards. There's a lot of questions being asked about priorities, about how education is conducted, et cetera. And where this begins to hit the IT organizations comes in some of these other rubrics where we look know the IT mandate really focuses on the question of, is the CIO, whatever that person's actual title is on your campus, is that person at the big table, whether figuratively or literally at the president's cabinet table, but at least, and most importantly, from the standpoint of knowing what are the, pass the quiz at any time, what are the top 5 issues, from the standpoint of the president, the board of trustees, or state agency if you're a public institution. Here, what are they, and how can I explain how everything we do in IT and our priorities, our plans, our services, our staffing, how do they match solving the big questions? The higher standard of accountability circles us back to metrics. How can you prove the answers to any of these questions that I've just been tossing out here? And are we properly aligned? Going back up to new alignment of priorities. If retaining students is the top priority, is that also the top priority of work in IT? Or is it at least doing everything that it can and should to help those at the institution who really work full-time on retention and recruitment? And so all of this happens against a background of doubts and diverging views. I don't think the U.S. is in danger of turning its back on higher education, but perhaps we've turned our back on certain people and their ability to participate. And are we doing the right things for even the people who do make it into the programs that they choose? So I think all of these raise challenges that sort of lead us to think, how do we reconceive how we work, with whom we work, and how we organize that work? So here is actually a quote from Christensen and Wessel, and it's an exhortation to go out and create your own disruption before somebody does that to you or for you. And so no matter how you answered the question, the first of the questions I asked earlier about whether it's more evolution or more gradualistic or a little more aggressive at your institution, we're hearing cries all the time, and I'm getting on that bandwagon of saying we have to really rethink our own profession before we can really hope to get more resources, to get more respect and influence on campus, and to get beyond, in some cases, lamenting not being appreciated and not having the resources we think we need. So last slide here. This was 2 years ago from Inside Higher Ed, blog posting by Kim Joshua. And he actually steps us through an exercise where he starts by looking at the business case of Netflix. And this is at the time when, as you'll remember maybe, Netflix stumbled publicly about trying to split its business into mail order and over-the-wire transmission of films. And in looking back on this, and this has become a classic case for sort of business studies, here are the steps that he recommends that we take and reflect on. And this is actually the core of a workshop I'm going to be trying out next week on a campus. So the challenges are, how would you think about replacing yourself? I shouldn't be doing this job, I should be doing that job. or somebody outside the college ought to be doing what I'm doing and I should be doing something else. I'm not saying I should be fired and my position rolled up and put someplace else. Don't take it that way. Service tomorrow, again, are we projecting out ahead? Are we understanding or looking enough at the kinds of change drivers that I presented in the previous slides so that we have our heads up and are looking out far enough? That's my view. The most valuable kind of vision to have is not the vision of something ideal, but something that's coming, something forecastable, something that we can anticipate. Heed the lesson that it's about experience and not technology. Put yourself in the shoes of the people using the hardware and software. Think wider in terms of what are these things worth. Be fearless, an easy exhortation for any kind of consultant or speaker to give. Tougher to do when it's you, but if we don't speak up, all of us out of that IT 100, if we don't speak up, if we don't take an intellectual leadership as well as a practical and political leadership on the future of IT, somebody else is likely to do it instead. Design for the customer, shifting around again. One of the other key disruptors, of course, is that the customer controls an awful lot now of what happens. What people bring your own device is not a voluntary program. It's what happens every day on campuses. So I commend this list of 5 topics to you. If you want to get back with me in a couple of weeks, I'll let you know how my experiment with using that as the backbone of a workshop with an IT staff goes. But let me now walk back. I'm going to conclude by jumping back through the slides and look at that pie chart again. Okay, so we see here we're heaviest on the applications and infrastructure sides of things here. One of the things that many of today's audience institutions have done, for just to fit in a little piece of this picture, they've gone over to Gmail or Microsoft 365 to put the mail outside. And in essence, they were trying to shrink the piece of the pie that was being spent on applications that way. Has that actually happened? If it has, what are the people who used to tend an Exchange server? If you no longer have an Exchange server, what's that person doing? What are the potentials to redirect? And maybe not necessarily just within the application space. Look over at user services. One of the positions that's been cut in almost every IT organization in recent years, some not so recent years, was a training position, a trainer position. What fills that gap? Is there really no need for people to be trained? Probably not in the old-fashioned way of 20 people coming to take a basic Excel course by sitting down. Infrastructure, again, what's the challenge here? How far can we shrink that footprint? What are infrastructure services opportunities? But yet with the caution that, infrastructure is where the game is now. And a lot of us are playing catch up. Can you stream video to multiple classrooms at the same time? Are you doing it over your general network? How's that working out? I'm also thinking that we don't put nearly enough time into the management piece, and not just because I'm a consultant and former IT manager, but if we get in too much of a heads down role, heads down attitude, what does that mean? And sort of my wrap-up thoughts on for this portion of the presentation, for my prepared presentation. After looking at all of these issues here, I think we come maybe with a different look to the questions that most get asked most often about IT organizations, and are really hard to do justice to without really digging into everything we've looked at here. So library and IT, where do media services sit? What's the connection with the people who run dormitories? All of these different pieces. So if we take a look at, how might the org chart for support in the liberal arts institution context, how might that be different in the future? I think really it can only be intelligently discussed after pulling a number of these issues apart and teasing them. I have seen some really interesting experiments recently. I just talked with somebody the other day who is effectively on a part-time reassignment to work on a project. Her position is in Art and Video Resources Library, and she's been delegated to work half-time with the IT, Instructional Technology Services group. There's no change in the org chart, no change in her supervisor, change of colleagues, change of purpose for a defined duration. I think that's an interesting organizational move, and something we might try looking at in different ways. I'm always interested to think back to the example of Research Park, Palo Alto, the park facility. There were a number of different independent organizations, in this case businesses, corporations, came together to create a shared space in which innovations were the objective, and where everybody came back home to their home institutions, and the products of that came back to wherever they went to. So I think down the road, the discussion on reorganization at the level that it hits an org chart on paper has a ways to go before we know what makes sense, who needs to be affiliated. If we take a look at that IT 100, once we prove relationships, then maybe the org chart follows after that. Okay, I'm going to wrap up my comments at this point. Let's turn it over to questions. What have we got, Rebecca?
Actually, okay, I'm going to go back and pick up some of the questions that came in the chat earlier. And one of the first questions was actually in regard to this chart, which is trying to get a sense of whether these numbers hold true for liberal arts colleges. And you gave the example of one college that you had worked with where it seemed to be pretty close. I don't know if you have information for other colleges, or if maybe people in the audience might speak to whether these percentages generally hold true for their organization.
I think it'd be nice to hear from people in the audience. As I said, I have data for one school and just my seat of the pants impression for others. So I can't really give a good answer to that question. But what do the rest of you see? How close does this look to what your campus has?
And it might take a minute for people to type into the chat room and maybe think about this question. I know that Ethan Benetton is there. Try it, Ethan. I'm calling you out. So Bill, who's at St. Mike's in Vermont, says it looks very similar. Much weaker on out. One of the questions I had in connection to the applications piece of it, and you were suggesting that, Drew, it's pretty close, sorry. You were suggesting that more institutions are starting to outsource things like email. And I was wondering, what would happen to those people? And I know certainly I'm seeing institutions that would like to have, at least faculty members would like to have more support for, say, applications on the order of learning applications or digital humanities or research or things like that. I don't know if that kind of reassignment is happening or if it's just cutting. But I know that there are certainly people out there who would love to see that. Looking back at the chat room, let's see. German Vargas says, my institution blends user services, infrastructure, and apps to the point where they're indistinguishable. Beth Taylor says user services is a bit bigger. Linda Bill says Yeah. And Bill Anderson suggests that the EDUCAUSE core data service might actually help you get this data for the schools that participate. So I think the general answer was pretty close for the most part, with some slight variations.
I think that's quite fair. I think it would be interesting to go and look at the EDUCAUSE core data and see. This could be a very interesting metric. Well, interesting if it turns out to be different from this.
Right. There was a question earlier also from German who asked, where would instructional design for academics and faculty support for learning technology fall? Looking at that breakdown.
I didn't write the article that this is based on. I don't believe that was discussed there. My understanding, where I would understand it to fit here, would be on the applications piece. I gave the example of the administrative side. User services, again, not to quibble. I think more often that refers to just sort of general break-fix sorts of things, but it could well be in there. I just don't really have any better information.
And then there was some discussion in the chat room of how that fell out at different types of institutions. And Herman Vargas asks us, should academic technology be under IT or academic affairs? And where would that leave the library? Or are these all CIO territory?
Yeah. I remember I was asked that question specifically in a consult, actually an interim position that I did several years ago. And the way I respond to that is, you know, you can draw the org chart in very sensible ways that would show people sitting in different places and reporting in different places. And as the questioner has pointed out, you know, there are ancillary questions such as, well, where would the library go if IT reported or if instructional support reported to an academic officer? But, you know, the key piece of the answer from my standpoint is, where are the most fruitful collaborations and the necessary connections? So if you were to pull instructional support people out of the general IT group, if that's where they are now, and put them with the library or put them with Center for Teaching, faculty development, whatever other cluster, they would certainly need a connection back to their former colleagues, organizational colleagues. And that's not impossible, just as we claim now that they have, you know, dotted line connections to people and administrators from where they sit. So I guess my answer is, I don't really see the important piece of this personally as being how do you draw the org chart, but where are your fruitful collaborations happening? And I guess, and I hope this isn't implicit in the question, is the current situation blocking some of those fruitful relationships and fruitful, we'll just leave that as a rhetorical question, that piece, at least from my standpoint.
I think the term you used was looking at IT as a virtual organization. She reminded me, several years ago I went to a workshop at the NSF that was focusing on the idea of virtual organizations to support interdisciplinary research in the sciences. And so this is what Todd Kelly also in the chat says: organizational structure is not important per se, but it's dependent on organizational culture.
Yes, that's really good. I saw, again, a little anecdotal injection here. Interesting exercise. If you go around and look, try to search through various college and university websites on Center for or Institute for, and you'll find that even on a small campus, you come up quickly with a dozen of these. So whether it's world studies or peace studies or environmental studies pertinent to a region. So they're all, we got organizations all over the place. And there's some, you know, there's obviously some reason why people will step forward and volunteer to be a new organization. Often these are one or two people organizations. But on the other hand, the proliferation certainly has not really clarified things or guaranteed relationships. So take a look. I can name names of colleges that have got just 15 or 20 of these.
I know, and again, to pull examples from digital humanities, at a lot of large R1 digital humanities centers developed as places to actually cross silos across different departments, but then they run the risk of becoming their own sort of silo by becoming a separate center and losing connections to some of those other places. I want to turn to another question that showed up earlier in the chat room, and that is Crystal Note from Vermont, I think, asked, what are the most useful analytics that your institution employs and why? So that I think that may be a general question for everybody, what useful analytics do you employ, but maybe Tom, you could speak to that as well.
Well, I'll start by saying I see very few analytics, very few metrics collected overall. So I think that my first part of my answer is that it's a very sparse set that we're looking at anyway. Among the more useful ones, in my view, would be if we could get a grip on trends at the help desk. I did see a very helpful analytic, study and report done at a college recently, which showed a very sharp decline in the number of computers. This was laptop computers brought in for diagnosis and repair over 3 years. So it was a very, very steep decline to the point where if you projected that line ahead, we know it won't happen, but it might approach zero in about 5 years. So when you look at something like that, I think then what I liked about that statistic is it opens up the question of, well, is it realistic to think we might shrink that sector of staff effort that goes into sitting around waiting for people to bring in a broken laptop or to show up at the desk with a related question there. So I think there are sort of frontline help services metrics that would be helpful to look at, trends, and also responsiveness. Are you able to drive down the length of time the tickets tend to be open? I would also take a look, and this is again something I've done in several consulting settings. If we could build a chart that address not just how many faculty use the learning management system, but what applications, what IT applications are faculty using, and how is that moving or changing, and how would you draw the chart a little wider so that you could pinpoint individuals who are just a little bit shy, a little bit short of making a bigger commitment to do more in IT. We hear anecdotally this kind of thing all the time, but we go sort of blind on this part. If you're, it's more a question for your chief academic officer maybe, but has anybody sat down and looked through the syllabi if you collect them for faculty just to get some kind of scatter plot of who's doing what with things other than word processing, in the curriculum? So those, I'm sort of flailing around here because by my own admission, I don't have a good answer, and I really strongly suspect it's not just me being out of touch, but I don't think we're doing a good job of looking around.
Well, I see that it is actually 1:01 here in Texas, so I think we need to go ahead and wrap it up today. I wanted to say just a couple more things before we end. We have one more nightly seminar scheduled, at this point, one more scheduled for this semester, and that will be next Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be hearing from the group that works on the Dickinson College commentary at Dickinson College. And the title of the seminar is Collaborative Digital Scholarship Projects, the Liberal Art of Drupal. And so it'll be Chris Francisi and colleagues. This is a collaborative digital scholarship project that Dickinson's producing, and I think it's a model that other small colleges might look at if they're interested in putting out sort of public humanities or public scholarship projects of any type. And again, that's next week. Also remind you that after every seminar, we send out survey requests via email, and we really appreciate your feedback and input, not just on the seminar that you've just taken part in, but also your suggestions for other topics that you'd like to hear about. So please put those in the survey, or feel free to contact me directly if you have ideas for future seminars. And finally, to keep up, you can subscribe to the nightly news. That's the best place to look to see what programming we have coming out in the near future. So I'll say thank you very much to Tom Warger, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Thank you.